eternity of pain. Unchanging.
Never had to run a build that has to manage mana the way this one does.
So you finally returned to me, and with a guest.
Let's see how this goes.
But first, prove yourselves worthy.
Aberroth! Face us yourself!
Not do that.
Oh no, I don't take that one. Alright, they just melted. Even with the mana mismanagement, that's so funny. It was a little bit too low, so maybe I'll try and stick around 100 instead of like 50.
Such wasted potential. Orobyss would have welcomed you. You fight for nothing.
Damage is good. My movement speed is slow as fuck.
See the beauty we were denied. Terror turned her back on us. Embrace oblivion.
Oh my gosh, I was trying to avoid that one.
The void hungers. We got worthless. The gods tore our world apart. They deserve their fates.
Oh no, 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 not that one.
The void comes. We treated the world no better. Death is our legacy. Oblivion. We got worthless. The void hungers. Die. Worthless. Oblivion. The world called to Orobyss. This is his answer. The void comes. You fight for nothing. We get worthless.
There we go! First try with the character! Woo! That is insane. Oh. Let's go. I wasn't sure if this character was good enough, but the damage was so good! The damage was so good! Holy cow. Sure. Okay. Wow, I am so happy. It was my first try, and I must say, now having done this, this character is freaking stressful. Holy cow. The movement on Sentinel is not it. The movement on Sentinel is not it. But we did it. Alright, boys. Boys and girls. For all of those who are playing this game. For all of those who are interested in what is a very funny build. And a very high damage build, actually. I'm going to do a full walkthrough. Right, I'm going to do a full walkthrough. And I'm going to talk about, like, the idea. So, what you guys just watched was the Aberroth Kill. Right? There were a lot of times where I took hits. And I healed it back up. And so this build, as you can see, is durable. It's durable enough. I think I'm at like 650-ish to 700 corruption on my most powerful monolith. And so I'm at a reasonable point. The build is reasonably strong. It has really good clear. I think monoliths are where it thrives. Boss killing is a little bit hard just because of the mobility. Not because of like defenses or damage or anything like that, just because of mobility. But monoliths, ooh, it feels good to clear. It feels so good to clear. Okay, so let's talk about the idea of this build, right? I wanted to make a just direct cast Smite build that wasn't a Void Knight, right? Because you see Void Knights do it all the time, and I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to do one that was sort of using Devotion, because I saw that it existed, and I was like, maybe I can use this to scale the build. And I didn't want to use Orobyss, right? So there's this sword called Orobyss that is super popular. It's the multi-strike sword. There it is. There's a sword called... I hate that. There's a sword called Orobyss that kind of does a lot of things inside the build. Let me grab some pieces of gear just from my stash to show you guys what I was thinking of doing and how you can scale this build damage-wise, right? And then we'll look at shields. Okay, so this is everything I need to explain sort of what we were thinking with the build. So the whole point of this build was I want to cast Smite. I want to directly cast Smite, right? Smite is a Paladin ability that you get as an implicit, a Sentinel ability that you get as an implicit. A lot of the direct cast Smite builds that you see are Void Knight, because Void Knight has a bunch of things inside the tree. If you look at its passive tree, it has a bunch of things that it converts it to void damage. It gives it bonus damage. You can add like spell void damage. You can give it crit multi. You can give it vitality scaling. There's a lot of support inside Void Knight for Smite. And you don't really see that everywhere else, but you do see a lot of more generic stuff. So I wanted to try it out with a Paladin, and I really wanted to try out, I saw this node right here called Holy Precision, which has increased spell crit strike chance and increased crit strike multi with lightning skills. So I wanted to turn Smite into a lightning skill and crit with it. That's what I wanted to do. And I did it. I turned Smite into a lightning skill and I critted with it. And what's really important about Smite is that it has added crit strike multi, which is huge, as well as 250% added, or sorry, multiplicative, 250% more damage on this node sacrifice, which is huge, a huge multiplier, and then 20% per point on this node called Conflagration for things that are ignited, right? So if you have any ignite stacks on them, you're going to do 80% more damage to them, up to 100% if I had one more point. And then for blind, 10% more damage per point in here, and I only have one. But if you had, let's say, 5 more points, I'd put 1 more in Conflagration and 4 more in Blinding Flash, and that'd be max amount of damage. So my current configuration has 250 plus 90, so 340% more multiplier, I think. I think that's how it works. I think more multipliers add together and then do more. But it has a bunch of more multipliers. And there's this node right here that lets you double cast 1/3 of the time, right? So Smite has a bunch of interesting nodes. But then the question was like, how do I gas it up, right? And there's this amulet called Devotion, which gives you, if you look at that second line, the second line of white text, it says +1 spell damage with Smite per 5 missing mana, which is why we have 667 total mana. So once I cast, I'm just casting Sigils of Hope to lower my mana. Once I cast Sigils of Hope and I have a lot of missing mana, my Smite will do the most amount of damage it can possibly do, right? And I will, if I move around, I will stay at the same amount of mana and slightly lose mana. If I stay still, I will slightly gain, right? And I'll explain that in a bit as well. So that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to figure out a way to cast Smite with Devotion and make it crit and do a lot of damage. That was my goal with this build. And my first line of thought, obviously, was, well, when I was leveling, I was using Orobyss to get from level like 50 or 50 is when you can equip it. 50 to 70, I used Orobyss just to power level, right? From normal monoliths to get to empowered, I power leveled with Orobyss. And I would recommend everyone else to do the same if you have one handy. And level like 12 or whenever, level 6 to level 50, I just used Polaris. So once I started doing direct cast, I thought, okay, there's this node inside the Paladin skill tree, right here, called Gladiator, that lets you equip swords in the offhand. So how can I gas my damage up by equipping Polaris' Sacred Light in my offhand? What can I equip in my forehand to make it work? Well, Kolnavar's Claim was my first solution, right? It gives me increased lightning damage, which is big, increased lightning spell crit strike chance, and because this is a spell, this is huge, right? Lightning base damage, and it solves the problem of me having too much mana by removing all my mana and converting to ward whenever I have too much. And it was pretty decent. I ran that up to like 300, 350 corruption. And once I got to 350 corruption, that's where I started feeling kind of bad. 350 corruption was sort of the limit of this dual-wielding Kolnavar's Claim build. And as you can see, this is a really good Kolnavar's Claim. It gave me the ignite that I needed, as well as tier 6 crit, and a decent amount of it, right? So I had a bunch of crit multi. It gave me base crit strike chance. It gave me added spell damage, like base spell damage. And as you can see, it has 40 on the implicit, as well as 19 lightning spell damage. So a lot of damage built into this scepter. But I was too weak defensively. So my next thought after that was, okay, let me drop dual wielding, because if you look at the dual wielding, right? If you look at dual wielding, you go to Gladiator, damage taken while dual wielding plus 9%, right? So you have a 9%, you increase the amount of damage you take by 9%. And I was like, okay, we can essentially take 9% damage reduction by not doing that. So I tried this catalyst here. That gives me 100 mana, 6% spell critical strike chance, and intelligence. And it was working pretty well. No complaints here. I had a lot more mana than I do right now, but I felt that I wanted some cast speed, and the amount of ward I'm generating isn't that insane, you know? At any given point in time when I'm doing these fights, you'll probably see I have like 600 to 1,000 ward. So the added intelligence didn't really help that much, right? The crit strike chance was nice, but the intelligence didn't really help that much. And I was kind of overcapped on crit, right? If you look, I already have a Phantom Grip, right? So I was running Osharian because I didn't need Phantom Grip anymore. But all I really needed was mana, and this gave me base mana, and so does Phantom Grip. Phantom Grip gives me 7% increased mana. And the Osharian was decent. It was decent, but it was okay. I was still pretty weak defensively. And so I moved on to Bastion of Honor. This is the Bastion of Honor I have. As you can see, it says 1% block chance per strength against enemies within 4 meters. So as I had, at the time I had like 60 strength, 1% per gives me 60% block chance. And with all the block chance nodes inside the Paladin skill tree, so you would take Stalwart for an extra 3%. In Paladin, you would probably take Honor, and then you would go over here to take Shield Wall. And then in Forge Guard, you could take Steel Aegis. And that would get you to about 80% block chance, all in all. Or 70%, something like that. 70 or 80% block chance, right? And it was pretty good. I was fine with this, but the problem is my block effectiveness, if you look, it's like, it only added up to about 1,000. And 1,000 wasn't that great, right? So I moved on to this shield, which was a better shield in terms of block. My block chance went down to 60% because I didn't have that strength modifier to block chance. But my block effectiveness went up by a lot. So it was around 2.3k, which gave me a 53% damage reduction when I was blocking. And I had a blast with that. I ran this from maybe like 400 corruption to 550. This was a really good shield. I would recommend everyone to run a shield if you're playing this build in the mid game, because it gives you a lot of tankiness and it lets you really scale into your other items. But I was lacking damage, right? When you're running a shield, you lack damage. So I was running this Foot of the Mountain. There were a bunch of things I was doing, but I needed to scale my damage somehow, right? So I upgraded all my gear. As you can see, I have a Font of the Erased with attunement and healing effectiveness, increased health and mana, so pretty good there. +4 to Smite on my Twisted Heart. Of course, it's a 13% increased health, so my health went down, my overall durability went down, but it's a +4 to Smite, so I take it, right? My belt is crit strike avoidance, lightning damage, and physical resistance, and some increased health. So it was a really good belt for me. Paladin wants to run crit strike avoidance because of this node right here, Faith Armor, that gives you naturally 40%, right? Most other builds don't really care about crit strike avoidance, but because we have Faith Armor, you know, that's the ideal way to go for Paladin. So 40% plus 55%, I'm at 95%. If you look at my defenses, yeah, 95%. That's all I have. And that's pretty good. I don't get crit very often, and when I do, it's like, you know, I can normally recover from it. Then, on my devotion, I got crit strike multi and lightning pen. So, importantly, more damage. Polaris' Sacred Light, crit strike multi and spell damage. More damage. Right, so I increased my damage strength on my Phantom Grip. I increased my damage to the max, right? And it was still only okay. So I was looking for options, right? Because I had tried this catalyst before, and it was fine. But I don't really need the crit strike chance, right? One Phantom Grip is sort of enough, if you look. I'm critting most of the time, right? Critting like 80% of the time or something like that. If you look, I have 29% crit strike chance, 200% to lightning abilities, and with this +6% base spell crit strike chance, right, +6%, that's operating off of the 7% I have, so this is actually doubled. 29, so my 30% and 60%, 60%, it's like close to 100% basically. I'm just doing some very like back of the hand math. So I'd increased my damage, and so I didn't really need more crit strike chance. And so I went for Scales of Aetera, right? Cast speed. I was looking for some cast speed versions of this one, this Mana-Fused Crystal Skull, but I couldn't find any in my stash, and I just wasn't dropping any. I don't know if you can actually drop Catalyst as a Paladin, so maybe I had to go through my prophecies for that. But Scales of Aetera, if you look at the infusions, here, the cold infusion grants a stack every second. Each stack grants more cold damage and less fire and lightning damage. Upon reaching 10 stacks, Cold Infusion applies Cold Overload for 10 seconds, granting 80% less cold damage and removing all Cold Infusion and Fire and Lightning Overloads. So you do 10 seconds of more damage and then 10 seconds of less damage. So I really didn't want one with lightning damage because lightning is my main damage type. So I went for the Cold Fire, right? I wanted to dodge my main damage source. And it has implicit cast speed built in. This is 11%. It could be 20. 20 would be the best. And then I had a tier 4. This is just what I had laying around. But it also comes with attunement and intelligence. And it already comes with intelligence on the base. So it's a lot of intelligence, a lot of ward retention, basically, from this. Because I have 38 intelligence now. So a lot of intelligence, which is pretty good for maintaining my ward. But even better, I get the cast speed, which is important for my damage. So this is an increase of 23%. If you look at devotion, that's with my missing mana, it's probably around 40%, right? Because it's a percentage of your total mana. I'm probably, with 100 mana, I'm probably sitting a little bit over 40% cast speed. And then +4 to Smite, that's not cast speed. There's no other cast speed in this build, except for the fact that Polaris' Sacred Light, is a sword. And swords have this funny little thing in Paladin where, or in the Sentinel skill tree, where you can get sword attack and cast speed plus 30%. So in reality, I have like 100% cast speed whenever I'm using Smite. 100% bonus cast speed whenever I'm using Smite. Right. So that's how I solved for damage. And as you guys saw, I did the Aberroth Kill. It was relatively fast, a little bit hard because I don't have that much mobility, but that is what it is. Okay, so that's my journey through this build. Now I want to talk about some of the cool interactions. But I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Babbling Bike. Babbling Bike is his name, is his YouTube name. I'm assuming his name is Mike. But hey, Mike, you showed me this. I saw his video on his Smite journey, and I saw a video that he did on like a fire Smite, and it was really tanky and it was really powerful, and it was clearing like 1,000 corruption. So I was inspired to play, or I was already playing this build when I saw him do that, and I used some of his tech inside the build. So I want to explain that tech right now. And I'll link his video down in the description below for those who find my video and want, you know, the OG, it's him. But let me go through an explanation really quickly. So the sword Polaris is pretty interesting, right? It has a couple lines of text that are interesting, which says spell damage per 2 strength. So we love strength stacking, which is why we have 79, giving us, you know, 39 spell damage from this. But it also has 2 other lines, right, that are really interesting to a direct cast build. The second from the bottom says 34% chance to cast Smite at 2 additional targets when you cast it directly. So whenever I cast Smite, you see how it sometimes hits other targets? Yeah, that's because Polaris is triggering and it's casting it at other targets, okay? But also, 45% chance to cast Smite on melee hit. And it doesn't say direct melee hit, it just says melee hit. Which means if we turn Healing Hands into a melee attack, so if I face this direction, you see that little cone that I shoot out in front of me? That's Healing Hands. So, whenever I do a direct cast of Smite, and then Healing Hands hits all the targets, each one of those hits has a chance to cast Smite. So, as you can imagine, against mobs or bosses, this gives another chance to do Smite. And considering Smite is my main damage ability, and it hits like anywhere between like 8 to 30k, 40k, you know, another Smite is very useful. Of course, this Smite is not direct cast, so we can't make use of the Pillars of Light, but it's still an extra proc of Smite. Additionally, this is very important. We need Healing Hands to be a melee attack, because watch our health bar, right? We're max health. Every time we cast, we take a chunk of our health out because we have the skill Sacrifice, the skill node Sacrifice inside of Smite, that makes us lose 15% of our current health, alongside the item Twisted Heart of Eucharos, that sacrifices 8% of our current health to convert it to ward. So we're losing 23% of our current health, right? So since we're losing so much health, we need a way to heal it back. And Healing Hands, if you're inside the target area, will give you healing. And because it's a melee attack, we are always in the target area. And it gives us like residual healing as well. You can see it right there. So big thing for Healing Hands is that we need it to be melee in order to heal from range whenever we're doing a ranged hit. And it gives us a double hit for casting Smite again whenever we're in melee range. So we're doing max damage at melee range, and if we're at range, we need a heal, so we still need it to be melee. So no matter what, it has to be melee, right? And I found this out by like seeing like, oh, maybe what if I don't, you know, utilize the melee extra damage? What if I do this? I just had no HP all the time because I wasn't inside Healing Hands range. So that's important to note. So that's a funny little synergy in Polaris' Sacred Light. We are also, you know, a strength and attunement based build. We have 84 attunement, 79 strength. That's where our main damage sources come from. And strength, of course, is buffing up our armor, and attunement is buffing up our mana. So we are also a mana stacking build, right? Because we need the mana for our spell damage for Smite. That's why I have mana on my helmet, even though it's only tier 5. That's why I have so much attunement everywhere. Do I have any mana? That's why I'm running Phantom Grip for the increased mana, as well as Font of the Erased for the increased mana, because it gives 7% here and 7% here. So that's an additional 14% increased mana. I did have version of Polaris with mana on there. It was good. I would also recommend getting, instead of this 110 flat armor, if you could get mana there. I think mana might actually be a prefix. So maybe if you could get mana there, that would also be very useful. Okay, cool. We've talked about like the main stuff damage source wise that makes this build work. Now let's talk about some of the defenses. If you look at our stats, capped out resistances. The ones that aren't capped are pretty close. right? Pretty close. Armor, we have a stupid amount of armor. A stupid amount of armor. You don't need this much. I think if you have 4,000 or above, you're in a good spot. But this amount of armor helps us live because we're a Sentinel and armor is hard to come by, right? So we love armor. I think if you go to a higher level area, right? Because if you pull up the map area, this area level is 47. I think I actually have like 5,000 armor or something like that, or closer to 4,000. So don't quote me on it, but I don't think this is the amount of armor I actually have. I think it's a little bit less. Otherwise, we want HP. Defense-wise, we want HP in order to sacrifice it to get mana, right? So if you watch this, right, we're sacrificing our HP in order to generate ward. So you want more HP. If you can get like 3,000 base HP, that's a good spot. But as you saw, I was tanky enough for Aberroth. Definitely tanky enough. Farmed this character out in 2 days. The only piece of gear that was actually recycled in this build was Foot of the Mountain. I recycled it from an old Forge Guard that I did. And that Forge Guard was very fun to play. So I will link that video down in the description below. But also, this is the only piece of recycled gear. Otherwise, all this gear, I crafted it for this character and I started 2 days ago. Something interesting to note though that does affect that, I have Circle of Fortune maxed out already. So, you know, this is with a maxed out Circle of Fortune. But what I'm saying is, it's not anything too crazy, right? If you look at the, oh, what's happening? Okay. If you look at the gear, a 2 LP Devotion, that's pretty hard to get. But otherwise, 2 LP Polaris, pretty easy. 2 LP Peak, pretty easy. 2 LP, or 1 LP Skills, not that hard. And then I was Twisted Heart farming for most of today. And otherwise, we're just running some really good Exalts. So another thing, the really big killer of this build inside monos is damage over time. And in order to solve for that, we're running both the damage over time mitigation armor pieces that Paladin has access to. So the body armor, 10 to 17%, 15 is relatively high roll. This is a good piece of armor. Obviously, you can see my tier 4 armor suffix on there. That's how good this implicit is, right? That's how good it is. So this is a solid piece of armor, but very achievable. Tier 6 strength and otherwise tier 5s, right? This is so achievable, guys. This gauntlet, high roll on the armor mitigation, tier 7 mana. It's a very good piece. I would say if you had to farm for it for a day or two, that would make sense. It's a very good piece. And then this belt, lightning damage is useful. Crit strike avoidance is my source, and then physical resist because this is the place I got it. And I sealed health, which is huge. So this is a crazy belt. A lot of people like putting the prefix like for cleanse on potion use, and instead of mini health, that would be a great place to do it. Use the there's like a crafting tool that you can look up online. I'll probably link that in the description down below too. But use that for insight crafting. I think that's what it's called, insight crafting. Use that to calculate which one it is to get your potion. Phantom Grip, I've already mentioned it. Crit strike chance is really useful. Mana is really useful. Otherwise, we don't really care about it. It gives us strength. There you go. All you need. Font to the Erased. I have a couple different versions of these already. Yeah. So I have a tier 7 strength one, which is kind of cool. Do I not have one anywhere else? Okay, I have a tier 7 strength, which is pretty cool, with 10% increased health and mana. That would be better than this, except for the fact that, you know, I'd rather have attunement than strength, because attunement scales my mana and gives me a more damage multiplier on my smite, right? It's giving me 4% per point, so pretty good. Anyways, added spell damage on smite applies at 150%, which is why we want to add so much spell damage. Okay, so going back to defenses. Those two are pretty important pieces of gear. Those three, my three exalts. Otherwise, we're running a Twisted Heart. I was doing 550 corruption until I hit the +4 to smite. I think if you want to like really push higher corruption, you need at least a +3 smite Twisted Heart, I think, with this build. Anything else of note? I have a lot of crit strike from Peak of the Mountain. I don't leech at all, so this is good. All attributes is good. Increased healing is good. I got tier 6 health and some mana, so that's both my offenses and defenses are being helped out over there. Some other good options if you're not, you know, running Peak of the Mountain. Seed of Yggdrasil. Seed of Yggdrasil is actually a really good option for this build because it gives mana, which increases our damage, and it deals 20% of damage to mana before health, which is huge, right, in terms of keeping us alive. And we have a chance to take 0 damage when hit. And it gives us health, which increases the amount of ward we generate. So a lot of really good stuff on here. If you can get a good Seed of Yggdrasil, like I had one with tier 4 mana on it, I was definitely considering running it. If you can get a good Seed of Yggdrasil, it would be better. The only 2 required legendaries for this build are Polaris' Sacred Light and Devotion. You can run different boots, for sure. You can probably run, let's see. You can probably run Blood of the Exile. You like the strength, you like the intelligence, you like the move speed. It's pretty decent. You can just run normal Citadel boots. Citadel boots. Yeah, so as you can see, reduced crit strike damage taken. Overall, good stats, good move speed. I don't, like, you can definitely run Exalt boots in place of this. This is just something I had. Twisted Heart. It's a good layer of defense for this build, and I think if you don't run Twisted Heart, you should run a shield. And you can run just a normal Exalted Relic with +4 to Smite, I think. As long as you have cast speed on the Relic, it should be good. But as it needs +4 to Smite, and if you're not going to run Twisted Heart, I think you need to run a shield just for that defensive layer. I think because we're running Twisted Heart, we can drop the shield in order to get more damage, right? Scales of Aterra, I mentioned this before, is good. You can also run a normal Exalted Catalyst. I just didn't find a good one. You want mana and attack speed and lightning damage. So any of those, any 2 of the 3, actually mana and cast speed over lightning damage. So if you get those 2, you're in a good spot. And then Devotion, the other required item. Getting a 1 LP version of this is not too bad. Getting a 2 LP is a little bit harder, but a little bit of farming with prophecies and you can make it happen. Probably like within 1 day you can get this item. So yeah. I put Crit Multi on here in Lightning Pen. You can also put mana. You can also put Armor Shred if you don't have it anywhere else. I have my Armor Shred over here on my gloves, as you can see. So I didn't need it there. And I had my Frailty on my gloves, so I didn't need it there either. So there you go. Devotion, Crit Multi. Your sources of Crit Multi are your Sword, your Amulet, your Catalyst, and your Relic. So those are your Crit Multi slots. You want at least 2 of them to be Crit Multi. You know, since we have Smite on our Twisted Heart, we really can't get it there. So 2 of the 3 should be Crit Multi at least. Okay. That's the items. I mean, honestly, my idols are literally everything. It's just health and mana mostly. Shred armor, health. That's a good one. Wow. I'm proud of that. Health, vitality, mana, health. And healing effectiveness. That's useful. And health. And then blessings. I didn't want to farm up Logon. So as you can see, it's the low roll of 64 mana, but that's fine. Max roll on Herot. Pretty decent roll on Spirit of Fire. I've been farming the Den of Dragons or whatever it's called, the dragon one. I've been farming that one and I still didn't get max roll, so whatever. And then I got a max roll on Raya. So that's how we do it. Those are my blessings. And anything else? Item-wise, I think we're good. So let's quickly go over passives because I think this is the least important part. Tune them as you need it. Actually, no, I lied. I'm a liar. I will explain the differences between the Shield and Catalyst versions. I'll explain that. And the two-handed version. So everything runs 8, 8, and 5 because those are the most important 3 nodes in the Sentinel passive. And then Time and Faith, do as much as you need in order to maintain your mana at the correct amount. So if you look, when I'm moving, my mana is slowly going down, and when I stand still, it kind of goes up. Okay? So make sure you just have enough time and faith so that your mana sort of stays the same. And then you want points in Blade Master. If you're going Gladiator, or if you're dual wielding, go Gladiator. If not, don't. That's all there is to it. 5 points in Void Knight for Abyssal Endurance. Because we want a Volatile Reversal, and those stats are good. Nothing else to say there. Okay, Paladin. This skill tree varies a lot if you're going shield versus no shield. Okay? If no shield, this is what we're doing right now. 8 points in Conviction, 8 points in Defiance, mandatory. 2 points in Holy Icon to top out our Necrotic Resist. Then 10 points in Prayer, 8 points in Faith Armor, 10 points in Holy Precision, and 10 points in Reverence of Duality. Those are all the necessary passive points for a non-dual wielding version. Okay? For a non-shield version. So dual wielding and Catalyst versions should run this. And then I also wanted to get more attunement, so 10 points in Dedication for more attunement. Because it increases my mana, that increases, my base damage, which scales multiplicatively, right? Then I put 2 points in Valor because I wasn't sure. And then the remaining in Raya's Light. So those two could be over here, and I think you just put your remaining points in Light of Raya. But if not, you can put points inside Valor for that health and healing effectiveness. Okay. If you're a shield, what's the difference, right? So we need to have the 12 points in Reverence of Duality, and we need to have the 10 points in Holy Precision. Everything else scrapped to the minimum, okay? Remove all the points to the minimum, and then we go 2 points in Honor. 1 point in Honor to get that base amount. And then 1 point in Sanctuary Guardian to get 1 point in Shield Wall, okay? Capiche? Everyone good? So we put 3 points there, and with all the remaining points, you put them in Forge Guard. 5 here, 5 here, 8 here, so that's 13 points. 3 here, that's 16. And then we need, I think, 4 more points, so we put 4 in Guardian. Actually, probably the 5 here and then 2 in Guardian, and then we put 5 in Iron Attunement, and that's your level 100 stat distribution. It gives you attunement, it gives you armor, it gives you damage mitigation per attunement, and that's huge, okay? That's all your points. Now, if you don't need the armor mitigation and you have a shield, you can scale back on the Forge Guard and run the remainder of your points in Heavenfire and Sanctuary Guardian for the base spell damage with a shield. That's the only change you can make. Okay? All right. We'll go through the skills now. Smite, I've already been through it. We need to get this node for lightning damage. We need to get this node to increase our mana cost 1 and to give us some AoE. You need to max out Sacrifice and then cap out Deep Impact. And then with any plus levels to Smite, you go into Conflagration. So Pillars of Light, necessary. All of these necessary. If you can get more levels, if I could get 5 more points somehow, I put 1 here and then 4 here. That's all there's to it. Volatile Reversal, stock standard, not explaining it. Just take the 30% damage. And then take the attack speed and move speed. Done. Healing Hands. Okay, this is important. Hand of Relics makes it cast on Smite. Seraph Blade turns it into a melee attack. And then damage per level of specialized buffs. So it actually does a decent amount of damage, right? And we have Healing Hands as a buff, and Holy Aura, and I think Sigils of Hope. Yeah, Sigils of Hope and Holy Aura are both buffs. So that's 60% more damage multiplier, which is good. Then Bane of Evil, Halted Scourge, Turn Undead, all the normal damage stuff. We're taking Purity of Thought to keep the mana cost in line. And then we put the remainder of our points, even though we're not doing any HP lost, like, what is it called? Exsanguinous. We're not doing any Exsanguinous or Last Step of the Living. We're taking this so we can get to Urgent Healing. It's our fastest route. I guess we could go through Blessed Parish, but yeah. Because we want the upfront healing for when we're away and we cast it, we want to be healed to full. You see how I'm still healing to full even though I'm like standing away and my healing hands isn't hitting anything? That's why we want the upfront healing, right? So any remainder points in there. And you don't need any extra points. If you do, I guess you could put more points in urgent healing. You could also put them in Consecrated Storm to get some electrify, because you do electric damage, sorry, lightning damage, but you know. Holy Aura, this is our ignite chance. That's right, this is our ignite chance. Then you go to attack and cast speed, crit strike chance, crit multi, some endurance, you want to get the poison res, and then increased healing. The left side of the tree, you can, you know, kind of mess with it as you will. If you want to put one more point in True Strike because you need more help critting, go for it. If you want more ignite chance, go for it. Then Sigils of Hope. Okay. Basically, if you are going block, you're going to take this. Otherwise, you're going to do this, which is go for Tetragram for maximum sigils, and then go for max damage per active sigil. And then go for Last Witch. I think this is actually really important. When you're clearing monos, you don't want to be spamming it all the time. So here you go. You should be able to keep, remember, if you're moving and casting, your mana will stay the same, right? So if I drop my mana down really low, that's good enough. Right, if I'm moving and casting, I'm not really regenning mana. So I don't need to be spamming my Sigils of Hope after the initial like entrance to the monolith. Okay. That's the build. That's everything. I will leave you guys with that. This build is awesome. It does so much damage. It took me 2 days to put this together. It's insane. And I feel like the requirement is not so crazy. I think Babbling Bike had like a red ring and an Osarian and stuff like that. I don't know if they're necessary, but there is some farming involved. But you can do it. You can beat Aberroth. Good luck, everyone. Try it out. Peace.